Well, hello everyone, and hello Nate.
Hello, birders. Welcome once again to another What's This Bird Live. I'm Nate Swick. That's Greg Neise. We're going to talk some birds today, and we're excited to have you here to do it. Everybody, if you are not familiar with this What's This Bird Live program, and by this point, I think probably most of you are, what we do here is the ABA maintains a number of Facebook groups, and one of them is called What's This Bird? It's where people can take photos of birds that they have seen, either in their yards or out when they're out birding or wherever, with their cameras, with their cell phones, whatever, and they post them, and our community identifies them every once in a while. We take the opportunity to talk through some of those identifications a little bit more deeply, and also just to chat with you about birds,
Yes.
birding,
So if
and all
you
that
are,
stuff. How you doing, Greg?
oh, I'm good. I'm good. I was just going to continue what you were saying there. If you guys you're on watching us on YouTube or on Facebook,
Those are the places.
those are the places. Jump in the comments because we want to talk to you as
That's
well
right.
as
We're happy to say hello.
yes, we're and if you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, drop it in the comments. I'm watching Facebook. Nate is watching Twitter, and we will try to get to you as best we can. I'm doing really good, Nate. How about you? We had a little bit of. I want to apologize. Last week we had a bit of a scheduling conflict.
Oh yeah,
Kept
was that
us
it?
kept us out of here.
Didn't
But
remember exactly what it was.
we are back.
We're
Um,
back. We're back. We are. As always, if you like to keep up on when we do these little programs, please join the ABA and send your email to us, and we will send you our newsletter. You don't have to be an ABA member to get our newsletter. However, if you'd like to go to aba.org, at the bottom of any of the aba.org websites, you scroll on down, you can find a link to sign up for Flight Calls, which is our weekly newsletter, and we'll
yep.
always put a little notation in there when we are planning to do one of these programs, so you don't miss it, so you know that we're ready to go. It's lunchtime across much of the North American continent, maybe a little bit early lunch on the West Coast, and I
It's
hope
also
you're
peak migration.
it's also it's the time. It is the time. Hampton Lane asks, "What is the topic for today?" The topic is birds.
Well, the topic is
Well,
birds,
we have a
but
subtopic.
sort of by happenstance,
Topic
uh,
is flamingos.
it still is flamingos. That's
It's
true.
still the
Flamingos,
thing.
flamingos, and limpkins.
We are
Um,
3 weeks. We are 3 weeks past the landfall of Hurricane Idalia, and there are still flamingos all over the place. It is increasingly ridiculous. I've never seen
it's
anything like this.
it is yes. That's increasingly ridiculous.
Yeah.
But we do have a theme today that just sort of happened, so I ran with it,
Well,
and that is
our theme is basically decided by the kind of photos that we frequently get to What's This Bird during the few days, a few hours before we go live. And,
absolutely
certain times of year, we get certain kinds of birds. And so we're going to talk about those today because
sparrows, sparrows and warblers,
sparrows and warblers.
or as
Sparrow
they
warbler season.
say in New York, wobblers. Um,
Wobblers,
wobblers,
wood
wobblers,
warblers,
wood wobblers. Um, yeah, it's the weather has been because of the storm that has been parked off of well where you are, the Mid Atlantic. The storms have pushed
The hair that's bugging me.
these east winds across the
Yeah.
Great Lakes for 2 weeks or more now, and has just shut down so much. I mean, we've been doing pretty well with things like warblers and passerines. I mean, it's been good here, but the hawk migration has been pretty much zeroed out
Yeah,
by
you
the
need that
east
west wind
winds.
for those, don't you?
And
Yeah.
we've got our
You gotta
first big cold.
push them up against the lake. That's what you need.
Yep. And we've got our and they're just kind of hanging out, I think.
Donna Schulman. Donna Schulman's in YouTube. Hey, Donna.
Hi
see you.
Donna.
Good to to note your presence virtually.
Well, we've got our first real cold front coming through a week from today, and it should be a good one. And I think we should
Yeah.
get a. I mean, assuming the long range forecast holds, we should get a really good push of hawks this coming a week from this weekend.
Yeah, that first big cold front of October is usually what brings down sparrows to the southeast where I live. It's in the first 10 days. It's usually not that first week. It's the middle of that second week when the weather really starts to turn. But that's the weather that brings sparrows down. It brings loads of kinglets. It brings lots of yellow-rumped warblers and things like that. Basically, the birds that we get around all winter. And they'll be in place. The juncos will be towards the end of the month, but they're usually the last ones to get in here, as far as perching birds are concerned. But yes, September, late September, peak hawk watching time and across much of the continent. No matter where you are,
and I think that
from Minnesota all the way to Veracruz, Mexico, there are hawks moving.
And I think the Pacific Northwest is about to get slammed with a big storm system, which could do some interesting things for them as well. So on Facebook, just want to say hi to a few people. Aaron Maislish, how you doing?
Hey,
Hampton Lane, hi. Coming to you from Wilmington. Yeah, Susan Nelson asks, are flamingos showing up in their normal range? I'm assuming they are. The 300 or so that are scattered around the eastern U.S. Is just a tiny
small
group
percentage
of the thousands that are in the Yucatan and Cuba and parts of the Caribbean.
Yeah, and I think most of it is they're big birds, they're hardy birds, they can travel long distances, and people are going to notice them. Like people are going to miss royal terns or laughing gulls if they get blown inland because of a hurricane. People are not going to miss a big pink bird standing on the beach.
Definitely not.
Thank goodness for that, because we are even limpkins. Like I think people miss limpkins because they tend to be kind of in the shadows and normally I should say. But flamingos, I think we're getting a pretty good accounting of all the flamingos that are scattered across.
I would agree
right now because that's not a bird that people are going to miss.
And Marty Horman says Hurricane Lee dumped a lot of our warblers in Britain, especially in Wales. Boy, we could do a whole show on that. They've been
getting quite the Welsh rarebird. Welsh rarebird.
It just don't. It's too early. It's too early.
It's a stretch. Anyway, the western side of Ireland and Wales has been, and actually, even in the traditional Western Palearctic rarity traps, like in the Azores, they're getting crazy. There was a mourning warbler in the Azores, which is a group of islands off the coast of Portugal, and it's not just the British Isles. It's all over Western Europe right now. There's
absolutely, and the UK got a veery this morning. I saw
a veery. Good Lord.
Yeah.
So they got a Canada warbler, which is wild.
Well, that was the first record for the UK.
Yeah, for the UK.
Found, I believe it was found
where there was a magnolia warbler, and then a second magnolia warbler showed up. So
there's somebody looking for the magnolia warbler, found a Canada warbler, and it's
like my morning. It's like a morning for me around here.
The Patagonia picnic table effect exists worldwide,
and they know where the birds are. Like these weather patterns are very precise. There's a reason North American birders knew to look in these along the coast, the path of the hurricane, to look for flamingos. There's a reason why British birders who have been doing this a very long time know how to read that weather and know where those birds are going to come up. And not for nothing, but the western shore of Ireland and Wales are kind of classic good bird areas for this kind of weather system, and so they were ready. They were ready to go.
Absolutely. Well, and with that. Let's pop up some birds here. I think we've kind of
Hampton Lane asks, where are we at? Where are you at?
Right. I'm in my office, as you can see my books and stuff. No, I'm in Berwyn, Illinois, which is a collar suburb of Chicago, about 9 miles from downtown, 9 miles from the lake.
And I am in. This is not my real background. This is my dining room wall. I am in Greensboro, North Carolina, in the southeast, the western Piedmont of North Carolina. In case people were wondering, we don't usually talk about that. We just we're out. We're on the internet. That's where we're at.
That's where we're at. All right, let's get to it.
Let's talk some birds.
Wait. Nepal.
Is it like midnight in
tracking.
Nepal?
Hello from Nepal. Right on.
Midnight there, isn't it? It's like 12 hours difference.
Yeah,
What are you doing? What are you doing, Nepal bird watching and trekking? Go to bed.
All right. Well, our first wobbler comes to us
We got a
from
wobbler.
Fairfield, Connecticut. So I gave it away early. Where these are all going to be warblers and sparrows.
Warblers and sparrows. Hey, but this is a very vireo-looking warbler. Like
it's a very
chunky,
flycatcher.
big-headed.
It's a very flycatcher looking warbler.
Little flycatcher there on the right. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
so-
I mean that pretty much is the identification right there. What is the most vireo-looking warbler? Well, we'll talk about some other stuff too.
Yeah. So what are you seeing here?
So I see a mostly plain overall bird, but it is lighter on the undersides than it is on the upper parts, which would rule out things like first of all Tennessee or orange-crowned warbler. I see wing bars. I see pretty strong wing bars on this one. I see two of them.
Yep.
I see what looks like eye arcs or a broken eye ring. So it's got an eye ring, but it's broken on the front and back. It kind of pinches off there, and it's got a pretty strong eye line. It's dark in the lower, dark a little bit behind the lower. I have some theories of what this bird is. Pale legs, but pretty chunky for a warbler.
He's Nepal Birdwatching says, "I'm watching you guys."
Oh, it's only
11 o'clock.
Okay, that's not so
Okay,
bad.
that's
not so
not
bad. I
bad.
thought it was like 1 a.m.
Okay, so a couple of things that stand out for me is as you mentioned, the legs. It's definitely not a vireo because it doesn't have gray feet. Vireos have kind of big, chunky gray
Always have
feet.
gray feet.
So we'll just get that out of the way. I see the bird, the photo on the left, and confirmed by the photo on the right. It's got
catch us next time.
It's got
Responding.
It's got kind of this clean throat that's very separated from the auriculars and the rest of the face. That's consistent.
Yeah.
And then it's got another very subtle field mark that we're going to talk about here in a second. And the bill doesn't look well. It's really hard to see the bill in these photos, but the bill doesn't look all that. I'm not going to looking at it more. It's like we can't really talk too much about the bill because the photo doesn't show us
other
the
than
bill.
the fact that it looks kind of big. And I think that any other warbler that we see, even at this angle, is going to look very narrow, especially at the base of the bill. The fact that we can see this bill so well, and it is obscured, I think, in the photo on the right. It looks like there's a stick that goes exactly right alongside the bill, so it's hard to get a sense. But the photo on the left, it looks pretty good sized. But that's not a field mark we're going to use to identify. There's enough here to identify it without looking at the bill. But in this species, the bill is generally going to be pretty thick for a warbler.
Yeah. So looking at the we always have these caveats about photographs like this because
for sure
the camera can do a lot of work and work against you in situations like this. So looking at that kind of face, if you kind of went to common yellowthroat, I wouldn't be because first-year female common yellowthroats can be extremely dull. And if the camera's working against you, I could see that. But yellowthroat has big pink feet. That's like one of the first things you see.
And no wing bars, too.
And, well, then, yes, when we get to the second picture over there, exactly. The wing bars gets rid of common yellowthroat. So I put together a comp to show a couple of field marks that
straight out of Compton.
These the pictures on the left are a first-year female pine warbler that I photographed way back in 2008. But we can see the bird on the right, the mystery bird, is a pine warbler, and you can see on the bird on the left top how the auricular and the throat and a little bit of dark markings there. The bird on the right has that. But the thing I wanted to point out here, which is not an artifact and it is real, is look at the side of the neck on the bird on the right, how it's got that kind of pale crescent. That's real. That's not lighting. Look at the comp here on the left, the bottom bird on the left. You can see it on the bird above, but both of them show that pale crescent, which is really only two of our warblers show that, and that's Cape May and Pine Warbler, which is what this bird is.
Yeah. And the structurally those two warblers are very different. Pine
They
being
are.
kind of a big, lethargic, kind of chonky warbler. Cape May being very small, short-tailed, little tiny bill, very frequently very streaky. This is one of the pine warbler looks that they can give you. This first-year female bird that can
Yep.
be very confusing the first time you see it. And down here in the southeast where I live, we have so many pine warblers right now. They overwinter in decent
Yeah.
numbers, but right now, all the birds from further north are coming in, and sometimes you get those super like bright golden adult males that look just like the birds out of Sibley, and frequently you get these, which are on the very pale end of the spectrum, and most of the time you get like birds that are in between. So pine warblers are very, kind of classically extremely variable when you see them, and they can be tough. But as Greg says, that kind of ear mark, you go up the ear in the back, and just kind of their overall kind of large, heavy look compared
Yep.
to some of the other warblers that you're going to see and frequently in the same flocks this time of year is going to make them stand out even when they're not foraging in pine trees, which also helps. I guess Cape May also likes pine trees too.
Well, exactly. I was just going to say, Cape May also likes pine trees,
Yeah.
and Cape May has actually a very thin, by comparison, decurved bill that actually I think is evolved for kind of getting in the clumps of pine needles and pulling out little insects that might be stuck in the resin. But it's interesting that the two species of warblers that you mentioned, Nate, Cape May, Cape May is one of the birds most frequently confused with pine in this sort of first-year female plumage. And then at the complete opposite end of the spectrum, pine warbler in the winter where you live is sometimes confused with yellow-throated vireo. And and it's like the winter,
Especially
you would
the
not
bright ones. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. And so you would never find a yellow-throated vireo in the middle of winter, pretty much anywhere in the United States, but definitely not in the Carolinas. But so it's wild how this species can kind of be confusing at both ends of the spectrum.
And they can also kind of look like, bay-breasted sometimes. Bay-breasted warbler is a little like a kind of a slender version of pine warbler. Bay-breasted tends not to be so unicolored on the bottom. So pine warbler will be, this bird is sort of that kind of really pale, cornstalk yellow all the way from the chin all the way to the legs. Whereas bay-breasted is going to show a little bit more color on the flanks, typically. And also be a little bit more slight. It's gonna have some stripes on the back. It's gonna have a smaller bill, more slender bill.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
when you're looking
but
straight up at
bay-breasted
it,
has a
sometimes
fairly chunky bill.
comparatively, compared to like
but
black
bay-breasted first-year female usually has that, and we talked about this last time 3 weeks ago. That kind of almost chartreuse green on the back that's kind of unique, like and in the area that we were talking about. Okay, so this is
the
a
eye arcs
pine.
tend not to be quite as big either.
Yes. So this is a pine warbler. I would say a first-year female pine warbler. Okay. Our next bird comes from Seattle, one of my very favorite cities in the world. I think we can just go straight to this being a sparrow because we've told everybody that it's going to be wobblers and sparrows today. What do you see in here?
So, for sparrows, it's really useful to try and break them into genera first, and that is the other birds that are sort of in the genus that share a genus. Things like Spizella, which is sort of your chipping sparrow, clay-colored sparrow, etc. Melospiza, which is your swamp song Lincolns. There is a genus that is very distinct here and tends to be large sparrows with plain colored breasts, or mostly plain colored breasts, deep bellies, kind of long tails, and that is Zonotrichia, zonos.
Zonos,
then
as we call them in the biz.
Zonos. And that make there's 4 species of Zonotrichia in North America: white-throated, white-crowned, golden-crowned, and Harris's sparrow. 3 of those 4 are pretty well known to a lot of birders. Harris's, well, maybe birders in the Midwest see Harris's more than others, but white-crowned certainly found coast to coast. White-throated primarily on the east, but does show up in the west quite a bit. And golden-crowned, which is more of a west coast bird. Yeah, so there's a couple. So what I'm seeing, it doesn't have that kind of classic bright white throat that I would see in just about most plumages of white-throated sparrows. So I don't think this is not a white-throated sparrow, which would be a rare bird for Seattle and for starters.
Yeah, and it's got. The first thing that stands out to me there is that pink bill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the pink bill, and that the head pattern. But especially the kind of richness of the colors on the head, that all just yells white-crowned sparrow, juvenile white-crowned sparrow. But
Indeed,
there is
as well.
golden-crowned sparrow out in that part of the
Seattle.
world, and that is frequently not as straightforward as one might imagine.
Yeah, what is the rule that says that birds get darker in more wet habitats? I forget. That's one of the laws of biogeography or whatever. And when you get out to Seattle, those of us on the East Coast are pretty familiar with very clean, bright gray, even juvenile birds, white-crowned sparrows, and actually across most of the continent. When you get out west, especially on the coast, they get kind of dingy, brownish. They look very dark, and they start to approach what we see in golden crown sparrow, which is a very kind of dark bird all over, and you can see that in this nice comp.
Yeah, and you can also see here we've got a golden crowned sparrow of about the same age on the left, and the white crowned sparrow on the right. Again, first thing you can see there, the bill color. Golden crowned sparrow has a dark bill, white crowned has a pink bill. However, things can be variable. Other things that we see here, just how bold the stripes are on top of the head, just that whole head pattern, and how the golden crowned is kind of bright and strong in front, but just kind of disappears as it goes back.
Glogger's rule. Thank you, Tony Diamond. Glogger's rule.
But also note the kind of brownish flank on the white crown, which the golden crown doesn't really show so much. And the golden crown is just all over, as you were talking about, a little bit grayer and darker. Now, having said all that, golden crowns and white crowns can really, depending on the age of the bird, can really approach one another in how they look.
And structurally, they're very similar. I mean, they're probably the
very
two most similar Zonotrichia sparrows.
So it can get kind of tough, even though these two birds look fairly distinct here. It can get kind of tough, but again, the thing you want to look for is the bill color and the overall strength of the head stripes going back.
And another interesting things to note about this white-crowned sparrow is this is clearly one of the western subspecies called Gambel's white-crowned sparrow, which shows up in the east every once in a while. It's quite uncommon, partly because I don't think people look too closely for it. But one of the things you're looking for there is the lore. It has a plain lore. So the lore is that area between the eye and the bill. And most of our eastern nominate white-crowned sparrows, it's dark there. The line goes all the way from the bill all the way through the eye and out the back. Whereas on these Gambel's birds, they don't have that lore, and also the bill tends to be a little more pink as opposed to orange. They tend to be a little orangey on our side of the continent. But Gambel's is the West Coast one. I forget what our East Coast one. I think it's just the nominate white crowned sparrow, but I could be wrong. There's a couple other different subspecies. I'm sure there's one in the Midwest.
Sorry, I had to look at my siblings because my dyslexia almost got the worst of me there. When you said look at the pale lores making it a Gambel's, I was like, wait a minute. And no, Nate is correct, and I had that backwards.
Those are the ones we look for where I live in North Carolina.
We do too. But anyways, my dyslexia sometimes gets the best of me. All right, so learning what we just did. Let's go to my hometown, Chicago, and what do we have here?
So some things to look for on this bird that we noticed on the other bird is that head pattern stands out even with the soft photos here, the heavily what are pixelated photos here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean you can see that head pattern, that really deep dark black stripe that goes across the arc of the crown. You can see the line through the eye here. You can even see a little bit of a darker lore on this bird because it's a
Yep.
Chicago bird as opposed to a Seattle bird.
Yep.
And it's a little bit paler on the front, although it's still relatively dark because it's a young bird. It's not that nice, crisp, clean gray that you see in the adult white crowned sparrows. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are very similar to the bird that we saw in the last photo.
Absolutely. And
The rump.
and there is it's hard to see here, but there is some pinkish in the upper mandible, which I think that in this photo, if this were a golden crowned, as Nate said, the head the main head stripe we can see would kind of blend into the rest of the head much sooner, and the bill would look almost black in this kind of an image. So yeah, this
golden crowned sparrow is a bird that people in the East should look for. It's not a super
Absolutely.
common vagrant as a pair, compared to some of the other birds that we sort of expect every year, like I don't know, ashler flycatcher, western tanager, etc. But it does show up in some numbers, especially in the Northeast and around the Great Lakes. So keep an
I've seen
eye
two
out
in
for it.
Illinois.
Yeah, they're pretty scarce down here. I think we only have one record in North Carolina, but further north they turn up.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is another juvenile white crowned sparrow. So we've had two white crowned sparrows here.
White crowned sparrow.
All right, this one comes from Connecticut, and these are two pictures. These are two versions of the exact same picture. The one on the left is how it was presented to us in What's This Bird, and the one on the right is one where I adjusted the exposure so that we could see into the shadows a little bit better. And let's go.
So I'm kind of on a journey with this bird, Greg, as I suppose that a lot of other people are. When you sent the slideshow over to me before we did the show, and I was glancing through the birds we were going to talk about today, my first gut impulse on this thing was Savannah sparrow. Savannah sparrow, boom. Because sometimes I just glance at them, and
that was my first impression as well.
And it would especially be true if I had just seen the photo on the left, because the lighting is not great on that photo, and so some of the things that would make me think Savannah sparrow, the very dark streaking, the relatively busy face, the no clear sign of any sort of color on the bend of the wing, which I would expect to see in another very similar species. I would probably happily call this a Savannah sparrow. It looks kind of long and lean, which is a very Savannah sparrow look. But that could also be the angle that we're looking at this bird too. But the second photo on the right, where you've lightened it up a little bit, it's got me questioning that original identification, Greg.
And you and I went on the same journey with this bird. Looking at it, just to kind of go on with what Nate was saying, the other species in play, at least in my mind, is oh geez, I'm having an old man moment. Help me out here, Nate.
Vesper sparrow.
Vesper, thank you. Jeez. Sorry, too many things flashing around me here.
I got you.
Vesper sparrow. So the other thing in play in my mind is Vesper sparrow, and a couple things actually started to come out as I looked at the image more. One, it really does have a distinct eye ring. I think the way the bill looks kind of thin and long made me kind of go over to the Savannah sparrow side. But
Wings
I think
look a little long too, but I'm not sure if that's really happening here.
Yeah, I think the angle is playing a lot with our heads here.
I agree.
The other thing that I notice is the face is pretty much bland, except for the eye ring and that bold white malar, that mustache stripe, and that is Vesper sparrow. The upper wing bar is kind of strong compared to the rest of the wing.
Yes.
Another mark for freshly molted Vesper sparrow, and I know it's hard to, but I think I'm seeing a white outer tail feather there as well.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Yeah. So this is where I play the odds frequently when I am out birding, because I see probably 100 Savannah sparrows for every one Vesper sparrow I see where I live. And so when I see a bird like this in the field, my gut reaction is going to be Vesper. I'm sorry, excuse me, Savannah, unless I see something else that causes me to think otherwise. If I see a little lanky, streaky sparrow that zips away from me, I'm immediately thinking Savannah, especially if I can't see those white outer tail feathers. But, sitting on this bird a little bit, seeing it in a little better light here, I think I am more or less convinced that this is a Vesper. It still looks a little busy in the face, especially behind the eye. I can't really tell whether that is the lighting, the angle, or whatever. But it doesn't look so much that I'm holding on to a foot in the Savannah camp. I'm pretty well firmly over in Vesper Town now.
And one other thing that we've talked about with this species in particular is Vesper sparrow is one of our birds that molts only one time a year, which is in September. Right? Yeah. And this looks like a very fresh, clean bird.
That is a good point.
The classic Vesper sparrow that we look for in May is a Vesper sparrow that's worn.
Yeah,
October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. It has been worn down for 8 months, and it exposes that chestnut wing panel and a bunch of the other things, and it makes the streaking a lot more crisp.
The Vesper sparrows that I see in the summer, the kind of the molt migrant. Well, I guess they're not molt migrants, but they start migrating pretty early, and they show up in like August, early September, where I am, and they look like they've just like gone through 3 dryer cycles. They look
exactly.
They look rough.
And then when you see the adult Vesper sparrow in August, right before they start molting, they don't look like anything. They just they
look like that's worn to hell.
Yeah, they're just completely washed out. And that's another thing to be careful about with Vesper sparrows. Pay attention to the time of year, because and I think Sibley does a really good job of showing the range of how Vesper sparrow can look. But I have a picture of an August Vesper sparrow that I took in one of the prairies here, and I love it because it just confuses the hell out of everybody who looks at it.
Oh, that's an open country bird too, and those open country birds tend to wear more than the birds we think of as scrub birds, shrubby birds, tree birds, etc. Because you're out in the wind, in the sun for 4-5 months, like intense wind, intense sun. And Vesper sparrow is noteworthy for being an open country bird. That's where I always see them. And they wear hard. And they look rough, and this is as clean as can be, and it's a plumage that you don't always see this bird in. That's for sure.
Yeah,
and I think that's what makes it look like Savannah sparrow for sure.
I agree. And one last thing before we move on, something we've noted here before is that in Savannah sparrow, the malar, which is that bold white stripe coming off the base of the bill, that mustache stripe, if you will, and the supercilium, which is the bold eyebrow stripe, in Savannah, they tend to be about equal strength and color. They frame the face, whereas Vesper pretty much always looks like this, where the face is just overall plain, and the thing that stands out most is the eye ring and the malar, whereas in Savannah, and I should have thrown a Savannah sparrow in here. I just
come on.
It was in a rush.
Master, you're falling down on the job.
I know. I should have done that, but I just didn't. I ran out of time. But it frames the face in a way that really never happens, no matter how worn or fresh a Vesper is.
Yeah. Yep. Good bird. Good discussion.
Yeah. Alan is back from Guyana. Good to see you again, Alan.
Man, we got Nepal, we got Guyana, we got quite the global watchership audience.
Okay, let's go to Ontario.
Ontario. What part of Ontario? Ontario is a massive province.
It
Probably
was
where the people are. I imagine
it
the
was
southern
the
part.
person it was a park that I didn't recognize, and I think it was like a local park, so they didn't really say where
Probably in the
exactly in
south.
Ontario.
Not that it really
Yeah,
matters.
well, I mean, I think 90% of Canada lives within 100 miles of the southern
I
border.
believe that's true. Yeah, in
Um,
Ontario especially so.
yeah. So as I said at the outset, this is all warblers and sparrows, and so now here we have a warbler with a completely dark, unpatterned undertail, or tail, I should say, which immediately knocks a whole bunch of them out of the water. So we don't have to even think about things like Cape May or Magnolia or on and on and on and on. So what are you seeing here, Nate?
Sorry, I'm responding to Tony Diamond on YouTube. He asked a question about the Vesper Sparrow. What about the chestnut shoulder patch? I know that we talked about it very briefly.
Yeah.
We kind of list over, but I've typed it all out, so I'm just gonna hit it. But I'll say it too. The Vesper Sparrow that we just looked at is in
Yeah, we
fresh
can pop
plumage,
back to that
absolutely
if you
fresh
want.
plumage. Yeah, it's in very fresh plumage. That rufous, that chestnutty shoulder patch is kind of underneath those feathers. It's kind of hidden by the fresh
Yep.
feathers. And as the bird's feathers wear over the course of the year, that shoulder patch pops out a little bit more. So as we said, Vesper Sparrow is a bird that molts one time a year, as Greg said, in the spring, in the autumn,
In
and
September,
so
right?
in September. So those chestnut shoulder patches need to be looking good in April, in May. So
Right.
over the course of the winter, those feathers will wear off and reveal that shoulder patch. And so they'll be looking fresh when it's time for them to look good. Not so much now in September in this very fresh plumage. So it's there. It's just kind of tucked up underneath some of those feathers on the outside. I don't
Exactly.
have to type it.
Exactly.
All right, back
Let's
to,
go back to our warbler.
Back to the warbler.
Yeah. So, what are you seeing here?
So not a lot going on this bird, obviously. Not a lot of color, kind of an all over tan. Looks a little bit darker on the back than on the front, but that's kind of a light pale yellow
Yep.
from the chin all the way through to the undertail coverts. The thing that really stands out, in addition to the undertail, as you pointed out, Greg, which is always a good thing to look for when you're looking at fall warblers, is that face pattern. You can see a little bit of that face pattern. And so there's
Yep.
two things going on here. There's a
I
it
would
looks
say
like
there's three things going on here, but
fair
go
enough.
for it.
All right, I'll point out the two that I noticed right off the bat, and so that is the pattern around the eye, right? So it looks very unique. It's got this kind of weird thing going on where it's got a broken eye ring on the bottom, so it's got an eye arc on the bottom, but on the top, it's sort of it goes over and kind of flares out behind it, and that is a unique face pattern.
Absolutely.
For this bird that we're looking for. There's no other bird in North America that has a pattern like that. And that it makes this a, can I go ahead and say it?
Go for it.
This is a female or a first year male.
Yeah.
Black-throated blue warbler. Very different from the male. Not, a lot of female warblers that kind of like a washed out version of the male for the most part. Almost like a male and fall plumage sometimes, but black-throated blue warblers are extremely different, male and female. A lot of sexual dimorphism there, and this is a very unique pattern on the eye and also the undertail as well. There's nothing there.
Yeah, and the other thing is just the way that the whole face, with the way that the auricular, which is the ear patch and around the eyes, and the dark lores, the rather thin little bill, but as Nate said, that eye arc underneath with a flaring supercilium eye line over the eye. There is only one bird that we have in the ABA area that has that kind of a face pattern, and that is a female type black-throated blue warbler.
Female type. Yeah, the first year males look the same. I think they're missing the little white handkerchief patch on the wing. That's really the only way you can tell, which we're not going to see on this bird given the angle that we have here. But female type, could be first year male, but it's a black-throated blue warbler regardless.
Yep. And it seems to be doing what they love to do, which is kind of hang out just at eye level in some
Yeah,
of the
they're low.
thickest
They like to stay
junk
low. That's
that you
exactly
can
right.
find.
Yeah, they are a nesting bird here where I live in North Carolina in the Appalachians. One of our more common breeding warblers, and they love those kind of thick rhododendron and mountain laurel groves. That grow those big bushes that kind of grow out, and you can find them in there all the time. Really kind of a dry chip note that sounds a lot like a junco chip, actually.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, and they respond really well to pitching more than most warblers. I don't know, like black-throated blues love pitching, like they're gonna come right at
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Okay, let's push on along here. This
Yeah.
comes to us from Florida,
Another
Jensen
warbler.
Beach. Yeah, another warbler.
Another warbler.
Um,
Yeah.
boy,
Let's do it. All right. So, lot of yellow on this bird. Yellow underneath.
Yeah,
Lot of dense streaking. Man,
lot of dense
that is
streaking.
a lot of stripes all the way through the chin, down the sides of the flanks, all the way to the belly. Yeah,
Almost
this is
looks like a tiger.
like a tiger stripe. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, no doubt. And a little tiny bill and a little tiny, like a short tail,
Yep.
relatively short wings, and a little tiny bill. This is not a very big warbler. I mean, no warblers are very big, but this one
Yeah.
definitely gives you an impression of petiteness.
Yeah, it's a very it's also rather compact.
Indeed.
And
Yeah.
B Bedingfield on Facebook suggests palm warbler, and that's not out of the realm.
No. The
but
pattern on it looks very similar to palm.
yeah,
Palm is very streaky on the front. Palm has a lot of yellow on the front. Palm has a big long tail that it likes to bob
exactly.
up and down. It's not short front to back. It's actually very long front to back.
Yep.
So yeah, that part doesn't look like a palm warbler. But if you took a palm warbler out of its skin and shoved it in a smaller warbler's body, you might have something like this.
Okay, we're getting into Halloween territory here, where
Frankenbirds.
Nate is
Yeah.
making Frankenbirds for us.
Frankenbirds.
Yeah,
Frankenbirds.
as Nate said, a palm warbler would have just an overall longer,
Yeah.
just a
They're
longer,
lanky.
lanky. That's the word I was looking for.
Mhm.
Also, palm warbler, we can see on the photo on the left. We can see the parts of the rump. Palm warbler has a bright greenish yellow rump, and it's
Yeah.
usually the brightest part of the bird, even in fall
Yep.
plumage, and it has a more distinct face pattern. Pretty much in all plumages except juvenile, which we never see,
Yeah, it's
except
got a
on the
little
breeding
cap
ground.
and an eye line.
It's got a
Yeah.
it's just
This
not
guy's
as
very
plain,
muddy face.
you know. And this bird, I mean, it's up in the pine trees. Why isn't it a pine warbler?
Oh, that's a
As
great
we were
question. This
discussing
bird likes
earlier.
pine trees too. Pine warbler will never be this streaky, never be this dark, and even the pine warbler, which does sometimes show some stripes on the breast, that sort of stripes are kind of localized here on the front, like a chest, like a necklace. Whereas this bird is like dark, dense streaks all down the front part of that body. That's what I see. Imagine you are birding in the fall and you look up in a pine tree 20 feet above you, and all you see is this little short front to back bird with like dense streaking all up and down there, like a tiger, as you say, which gives it its scientific name, which its species name is tigrina. Tiger warbler. Yeah.
Yep. And that the thing that stands out for me in the picture on the right is the bill shape. And even though the angle is foreshortened and it's hard to see the whole bill because there's something in front of it, we can still see the classic, and I'm going to go there now because we've already said it in one language, Cape May warbler.
Cape May warbler,
Bill shape.
de tigre in French.
Yes, which is it's got this unique kind of decurved shape. And on the left,
Honey creeper.
The photo on the left, you can't see it because there's a branch or something in the way there,
Kinda
some
see
pine
it
needles.
a little bit, but it's not
A little bit, but the top part of the bill is hidden. But in the picture on the right, you can see that how the bill is very slightly decurved.
Yeah, that's something you'll note. It's a flower picking specialist. I mean, there's a reason it has that. It looks like a honey creeper, like a for good reason, like a sunbird. This is a bird that probes in flowers, primarily in the tropics where it winters. Should be a lot of these birds in Florida right now because
Yep.
it is a Caribbean wintering bird. It overwinters in the islands of the Caribbean, so they'll be pouring through Florida like a funnel. Cape May warblers all the way into
Absolutely.
November. They are a late migrant as well.
They are, and Cape Mays are really interesting birds because they're one of the birds that hang out in the north when the weather's not too cold, or sometimes
Yeah,
even
we've
when
had
it is.
several winter records in North Carolina.
We've had them in
Sapsucker wells
northern
and stuff.
Illinois.
Yeah.
And in the winter, they can be found at suet feeders, which is like
Yes,
totally bizarre for a bird
Yeah.
that you think of picking insects and stuff out of flowers and from in between the pine needles, as it's doing here in the winter. And you were saying, Nate, that they're flower specialists. In the springtime, their faces are often covered in pollen.
Oh yeah.
And that
Yeah.
also really confuses people.
Or
Tennessee
sap.
warbler.
Sometimes they get sticky sap
Yep.
around their bill. Yep.
Tennessee and Cape May warblers are the two that in the spring have their faces often covered in pollen and confuse people.
Yeah, this is
yes,
this
and-
is I would call this a first year female because it is like even
I
a lot of times the
agree.
adult males will have a little bit more of a pattern. Cape May is another one of those birds that can show a little bit of a pale spot on the cheek,
Yep.
behind the ear. That's typically in the adult birds. Both adult females and males will show this, but this bird is just so smudgy in its face. The smudgy face, the small kind of petite size, and the heavy streaking all the way down the front is what you're looking for on a Cape May warbler this time of year. The heavy streaking in all plumages.
Yeah.
But if you see a bird like this that looks really muddy, but it's still got that heavy streaking, that's definitely a Cape May.
Yes, and Alex Cruz Chisnall on Facebook brings up a good point, and that is that they had one in Colorado wintering at sapsucker holes. And
Yeah, they'll do that.
I've
They do
had-
that here too. Yep.
There was one in a black-throated blue warbler in Chicago
Black-throated
in
blue is another one that does
January that was wintering at sapsucker holes, and the sap was freezing so fast that it was literally following the sapsucker along and getting in the holes as soon as the sapsucker moved. And that's one thing, a little bit of birding knowledge here, fieldcraft, is when the weather gets cold all of a sudden and the insects drop. If you have sapsuckers working trees, kind of spend a little extra time watching, because you'll sometimes, I found hummingbirds on
Yeah, Rufus
sapsucker
hummingbird will
holes.
do that. Yeah.
Especially Rufus hummingbird. Yeah.
Yeah, Cape May, black-throated blue, notably both Caribbean wintering warblers. They will sometimes linger pretty late into Christmas bird count season sometimes in the southeast by using sapsucker wells. Yep.
Yep. Alrighty.
R.I. Davio in YouTube says one in Union Square Park, New York City last winter doing the same thing. Yep. There you go.
And so when there's a lot of insects, they don't tend to do that. But after the cold knocks the insects down, that's the time to watch for that. And it's really pretty cool. And they stay pretty loyal to that. And it's always a good thing to watch for. All right, now we're going to go to Gilbert, Arizona for a sparrow.
Gilbert. Yep, sparrows and warblers. We got another sparrow here. We know it's a sparrow because you can see on that picture on the left, it's got a big triangular conical bill as opposed to a little dinky straight one like the warblers we've been seeing. So I mean, it's all kind of brown streaky.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm seeing here is kind of rufusy and very streaky, which eliminates a lot of sparrows. And I would say Arizona is kind of like the sparrow capital of the ABA area. I mean,
for the winter, yeah.
Well, yeah, and in the winter months, because boy, you find just about everything in Arizona, especially southeast Arizona. So yeah, this bird is kind of overall streaky gray and kind of rufusy brown. And if you flip through your Sibley guide, which I have right here, and just kind of go to just all the sparrows. Let's just do that real quick because where is that page? Yeah, here it is. Sibley does
Sibley does a great job with that.
a really good job of just throwing all of the non-breeding plumages on a couple of pages, so you can immediately see here that half to 2/3 of the birds are eliminated because they're not streaked underneath. So really,
That's right. We talked about narrowing those sparrows down to genera. Zonotrichia, like the bird we had, is big, pot-bellied, usually clean-breasted.
right.
Spizella is usually clean-breasted for the most part, usually has a little bit of a cap. When you see a bird like this that is so streaky, I immediately think of Melospiza, especially with that long tail and short wings. Melospiza, which is our swamp song Lincoln's trio,
Right.
most commonly. But swamp is going to be a pretty rare bird in Gilbert, Arizona. That's more of an eastern species. But I would think Lincoln's and song are going to be top on my list. There might be a couple other kind of near Melospiza species that we need.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I think swamp sparrow, as you said, because of the heavy streaking and the location, that can just be tossed out. Lincoln sparrow, the heavy blurry streaking. Lincoln sparrow looks nothing like this bird. Lincoln sparrow has this kind of.
I learned early on. We're talking over. I learned early on when I was birding that when you're looking at those two birds, where I grew up in southern Missouri, we had both Lincoln sparrow and song sparrow pretty regularly in the winter. When you look at a song sparrow, it looks like that those streaks were drawn on with a crayon. When you look at Lincoln sparrow, it looks like those streaks are drawn on with a freshly sharpened pencil. They're so fine and dark. These big old messy streaks are definitely a song sparrow thing. But there are some other sparrows that show some messy streaks.
There are, but the other thing too is Lincoln sparrow. Once you get comfortable with that species, it has there's a few birds that have sort of overall unique coloration. That just when you see the overall color of the bird just bam.
Lincoln's
worm-eating warbler is one of those. There's no other bird that has
similar colors. Lincoln sparrow
that has that
warbler.
kind of same color. Swainson's warbler is another one.
It's kind of like an ochre beige,
ochre olive
green,
but gray, but very gray, and that combined with the very crisp, almost black but not quite black streaking, especially on the back. It just creates a completely different looking bird from song sparrow. Having said that, I have seen young Lincoln sparrows that look a lot like young song sparrows and can be exceptionally confusing. But this bird's bill also.
Yeah. It doesn't look like a link. Yeah. Some of the northeastern breeding song sparrows can be more finely, the streaks can be more fine than the ones that are found kind of across the southern part of the ABA area, the United States. But those are winter birds where I live. Every once in a while, one of those will show up, and it doesn't have that kind of nice ochre beige that Lincoln's has, but it has like real fine streakings, and you're like, that's kind of interesting.
But all
some
this,
of the ones that breed in
rufus,
Atlantic Canada and whatnot.
All this rufus and gray. If you went for fox sparrow, I wouldn't think poorly of you, because I mean we see that head has a lot of gray and the bird has a lot of rufus on it, compare it with an Arizona fox sparrow, just because
that's the thing, because that heavy rufus is like the eastern fox sparrow, the red fox sparrows that we see here. But in Arizona, the fox sparrows, song sparrow like fox sparrow, are two birds that can be extremely variable. The birds in the east look very different from the birds in the far west, and so a lot of birders in the east might be surprised to see one of these western fox sparrows and how very different they look from the birds that we're familiar with.
Absolutely. And the fox sparrows, and they do get migrant eastern type, or at least more eastern, because as you go east, they get more rufus. This is the classic Arizona fox sparrow, which looks nothing like the fox sparrows we're used to seeing in the east. But there are a couple of things that are always true with fox sparrow. I think even when we get up into Alaska, although the most confusing passerine I've ever seen in North America was a fox sparrow in the Pribilofs, which I was sure I had an Asian vagrant when that thing popped up in front of me.
Big old bill on this.
Yeah, they're big and they're just dark and they don't look like anything. But fox sparrow has a yellow base at the base of the bill, and that holds true pretty much across the whole. I think even in the massive ones out on the West Coast. And look at the streaks on the underpart and how blurry and, as Nate said, drawn with a crayon, the song sparrow on the left looks, and how the fox sparrow has these, it looks like they're finely drawn little darts.
Little spots. Yeah, more like a thrush almost.
More like and wood thrush. They look a lot like a wood thrush with the
or a thrasher. Yeah.
Finely constructed little darts.
Yeah, and note a comment in YouTube worth noting. John Anderson. Hey, John, thanks. In Western Washington, no confusion between Lincolns and Song. Lincoln are way paler. It's interesting because we talked about Song Sparrow being extremely variable across the breadth of its range, whereas Lincoln, no variation.
No.
The Lincolns in the West look exactly like the Lincolns in the East. That is your bird regardless of where you are, whereas Song, depending on where you are, the songs can look remarkably different. In the Western Washington, I imagine because of Golger's rule. Thank you. We remember Golger's rule are actually quite dark and dingy because it's so much more humid there, especially ones west of the Cascades.
Yes, and Cindy Salanur. Sorry, I was just about to pronounce that when the name went jumping up. Zalinardo says chevrons, and that's another word that I was looking for.
Not the gas station. Yeah.
Exactly. On the breast of the fox sparrow, it's got these chevrons.
The Chevron gas station logo. It's like an arrow. I can't do the arrow, but it's kind of like, an arrow that has a little. I don't know. I don't know how to do it. It's like a military insignia almost.
Yeah, I believe we got a question from Mark McGee asking about sparrow field guides. I'm looking back here on my
book.
Well, let's see here. We've got.
I don't know if it's a field guide. I have some options here.
Yeah, here's one.
So what do you have?
Rising.
I have
Rising and Beetle.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Sparrows of the United States and Canada. This one.
I have Peterson. This
it's
Peterson
got it all.
that just came out. I'm trying to hold it.
You got to hold it in front of you.
It's by Rick Wright.
Yep.
Rick Wright. It's less of an ID guide though. It does have a lot of really fantastic photos of sparrows, but it's kind of like a life history, natural history one too.
Now and exactly, and that's
variation, clinal variation.
Either one of those. I think the Peterson guide is more readily available than the Beetle and Rising guide, but they're both excellent. And Rick Wright is a longtime friend of the ABA.
He occasionally joins us for these.
Exceptional author who sometimes, as you said, joins us. However, if you're an ABA,
everyone's saying Beetle and Rising. Everyone loves Beetle and Rising.
I agree. However, I'm gonna plug Rick Wright and his guide a little bit harder here, because as I said, Rick's book is wonderful, and he is a longtime friend of the ABA who sometimes joins us on these programs here in the comments, but. If you want to talk sparrows in detail with the author of the Peterson Field Guide to Sparrows, then you need to go to ABA Community, where Rick is a. Oh, did you like that?
Segue. That was
baby.
Fun, Greg.
Thank you very much. Yes, where Rick and all kinds of birders are discussing all kinds of things. This is the ABA social media platform called Community. The URL is right there. If you're an ABA member, just go there and log in, and it's all there for you.
I am using the Rick Wright's guide now. I am more certain that the sparrow we looked at earlier is a Vesper sparrow.
Is a Vesper. Yeah. And ask your sparrow questions there, and there is an extremely high probability that the author of one of the best sparrow guides will jump in and handle your questions there. And that, boy, look at that. We hit it right on the money. It's 1 o'clock. And we got all the things in.
Yeah. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoy these sorts of programs, please consider joining the American Birding Association. You can have access to the ABA community as well as all the other cool stuff we do and help support these free resources that we enjoy putting on for all y'all. Guys, we'll be back probably in a couple weeks. Once again, if you want to know when we're going to do it, please hop on to the aba.org and go to the bottom of any page and sign up for our Flight Calls newsletter. We'll give you a little heads up when we're about to do these. Otherwise...
And we also do on community. We also let you know ahead of time on ABA community when these are coming up, and you can discuss the program there after the fact. If you like the YouTube link, you can watch it right in the browser window there.
Indeed.
So yeah, we'd love to, and we would love to see you there.
We would, and we'll be back in a couple weeks. We'll definitely let you know if we are going to plan on doing this. Thank you.
Oh, no, we are planning on doing this.
We are planning on it. Yeah, that's the default. We'll see if something comes up. I don't think it will. We never know. But,
no.
Stuff happens. But thank you so much for joining us. We will be back in a couple weeks. And until then, please enjoy the peak of fall migration. It is a wonderful time to be a birder. The weather is glorious. The
Get
birds
out there
are
and
abundant. And we'll see you in a couple weeks to